A very good morning and welcome. We are very, very privileged to be having Professor Theo Feltzman, who will be presenting our session, IOPs Future Fitness for the Fourth Industrial Revolution, Shaping Our Future Proactively. So many of you would know Prof. Feltzman, so he allows us to call him Theo. He holds a PhD in industrial psychology. He's an registered industrial and research psychologist and an accredited HRM practitioner. And he says he prefers to call himself a work psychologist and a pracademic. Very interesting play on words there. His career spans over 35 years and has seamlessly navigated the worlds of academia and practice. So he's modeling for us how we can dance between those two worlds. His primary fields of experience were are in people strategy and organizational redesign and leadership management, large-scale organizational change, and strategic talent management. I invite you colleagues to read his full profile on WOVA and get to interact with the interesting work that Prof. Feltzman has been doing. Without further ado, I hand you over to Theo.
Thank you very much, Sharon. Can you see my screen and can you hear me well?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Thank you. Really, colleagues, thank you very much for joining us. And really, what you'll see during the course of this panel discussion, that it is going to be a team effort, because what you're going to see is the result of a future search project that's been running now for until the publication of the book for 2 years. And we see this session and these other sessions in this 2022 CIOPSA conference as the final culmination of what we have been doing in order to take this forward in terms of real action. So what we are seeing really, colleagues, let me just get this right first, is that the fourth industrial revolution is upon us. And with we have to position ourselves as being right. Let's move this there. We, as the in terms of the world of the industrial psychology and psychologists, we have to then make sure that in terms of the things that we deal with, that we are ready for this world, and that we understand the impact that the fourth industrial revolution is going to have on our world in terms of the many things that we would like to deal with. So the overarching challenge for us is how to conceive and design productive, humane workforces leveraged by the fourth industrial revolution. In exploring the future, in January 2020, the CIOPSA MANCO approved a future search research project with the objective of discovering and exploring what our world is going to look 5 to 10 years out, given the trends associated with 4IR and beyond into 5IR. And the objective of the project was really to reimagine the necessary realignment of IOP in all of its facets, to make sure that we understand this workplace and will be able to make a contribution as science practitioners in a future-ready and fit manner. Okay, I'll get it eventually right. Technology is... So over the period there on screen, we had a number of future search Zoom sessions. Some of you may have participated in this and attracted by a number of participants. In total, probably 200 participants. And we had a final integration session in November 2020. The future search team was diverse, young, old, and that brought a richness to the project and the perspective. And it was quite amazing to see with in terms of this whole team, which is really a compliment to the team. What was also encouraging, if you look at the faces there, is that a core of the leadership of CIOPSA actually partook, the leadership of different research streams, which places CIOPSA very well going into the future and getting ready for the future. What were the 5 research streams? The one was the changing world of work. This is the context in which we have to make a contribution. That was set, and this is the session we've just come out of with Sharon and her team. And I think there's been a shuffle in the program. That's why they've come before this overview kickoff session, is around morals and values and ethics base that we need. In other words, we're saying, and I think it came through in the previous session of Sharon and her team, that we can't engage with the world of work if we don't do it from a proper, a very clear, deliberately chosen moral values ethics base. Then in terms of that we have to have a response to this world and to the ethics in terms of that world, we need to be clear on our capabilities, education, training, and development that we need for that. And finally, what is this world to set us up well for the future world of work? Based on this, the outcome of the Future Research Project was a book published in 2021, which we see as a travel guide for IOP psychologists to engage with the world. And having visited this world, we believe in IOP psychologists working through this world can now prepare themselves for in the present for the future. And that is what the cover of the book looks like. So the current need, and this is what we want to cover during the course of the conference, is to actioning the recommendations in the book. What are the takeaways for the 2 types of action? What are the takeaways for me as an individual IOP? How must I get myself future ready? So what we're saying is virtually a grassroots process of you getting yourself ready and not bored like an academic department to get you ready. The book must enable you to work through it and then say, this is what I need. And the upcoming sessions will all be around that as well. What capacities do we need? What are the takeaways for me as an IOP? But then also possible actions by the IOP profession with its stakeholders, the what, the who, the by, when, the how. For example, redesign of a curriculum, a relook at our ethical code to be future fit. So the outcome out of the 5 sessions over the course of this year's conference is to put together a high-level future engagement and actioning report, which in a sense would be operationalizing the book and take it further and conclude this project, but then completing the travel guide. So what were the high-level findings, which will now be, like in the previous session, be explored in depth in the following sessions, of one of which we've had already. Over the qualitative findings were the following, which is very important because they applied guidelines for us to the future. The trouble with our times is the future will not be what we think it will be. In other words, the conclusion for the future is going to look different. Although differentially distributed, this different future is already with us. And if we are not confused at present, we don't know what's going on. In other words, you're not in touch, and hence you don't have a sense of confusion, what's going to happen and how do I respond to it. Thirdly, If we don't deliberately and deeply think about that future, we will have no future. The future will pass us by and turn us into distinct dinosaurs. Only those, and that includes all of us, and that's the appeal from the team, this future search team, need to make the future that we desire present. We can't wait like rabbits mesmerized by lights in our eyes and sit and do nothing. And if we, in becoming architects of the future, we need to envision our desired IOP. We must understand clearly who and what we should be in future. And that is really the purpose of this book and the purpose of these further sessions during the conference. So if we now go to the research stream, specific insights gaining from the future search journey, each of the leaders with whoever of the team they wanted to bring in will give a high-level overview of their stream to then be explored in depth in their respective sessions. And the first one is then the changing world of work, which is Ruwayne with Esther and Dieter Veldsman, and I would like to further. Ruwayne, you there? Is Ruwayne present in the session?
I saw him just now.
Ruwayne, are you there?
He is present. I see Ruwayne talking.
Maybe hasn't unmuted.
Yeah, I think Ruwayne, you might have missed to click your turn computer audio on.
Let's give Ruwayne just a chance to reconnect. Ruwayne, you there?
While we wait for Ruwayne to join, I'm seeing the questions on the ethics survey. The link has been sent to your email. It's been sent on the Wover app. So you can check all of those places and complete the survey so you can get that ethics point. So the ethics survey is now available. You can check your email or on the Wover app and you'll be able to complete that link. You are muted, Ruwayne. We can't hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Yes, you're there. Can I bring up your screen, Ruwayne? Ruwayne, you there?
We've lost you again, Ruwayne.
Sound is muted.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, you're ready.
Sorry, the settings keep on going. This is really living in the future, right? So thank you very much, Theo, for setting the context. What I would be sharing today or for this session is just some of our findings in terms of our chapter that we wrote around the changing world of work. And as Theo had introduced us, my co-authors were Esther, Dieter, and I. We have a session at 14:15 where we will elaborate on our findings. But what I thought I'd do for today is just talk about these contextual shifts that impacted on the changing world of work. And as you can see from the screen, as we look at these contextual factors or shifts, they revolved around the Vickers world, and I'll elaborate around that in a moment. Technology, sustainability, global competitiveness, and the economic power shifts and distributions. And so as we look at the Vickers world, the changing context is characterized by increasingly variety interdependencies, complexity, change, ambiguity, and seamlessness. And I think that the world's not going to become less ambiguous and complex, but we need to find ways in which we in this emerging world of work is able to deal with the Vickers world that we're operating in. The second contextual shift is around technology, and as we've seen some of that today in our conference as well, that data is going to be the new currency, and analytics are going to become the basic capabilities that all of us, even as psychologists, would require. And technological progress, what we found in the research that we did and the literature review, is going to stimulate growth through AI, machine learning, Internet of Things, big data, 3D printing, and we've seen some of these in reality as well, and blockchain. And as we think about, particularly within the context of the future of Africa, we believe that 4IR will largely, the future of Africa will be largely influenced by the role of technology. And we've seen how mobile technology has really changed in the way people bank across the African continent as well. The third contextual shift is around sustainability. And sustainability can be expressed in terms of the 5 interdependent Ps, which is really about productivity, prosperity, people, peace, and planet. And the green agenda is going to become a prerequisite for doing business, and we hope doing business across the African continent as well. This means that organizations will be evaluated on their ability to manage their global footprint and deal with waste and continue to positively impact societies in which they operate in. And so the third contextual shift that we found in our study and our write-up is around global competitiveness, and we've seen this already play out in how technology such as Uber has disrupted industries. For example, Uber is the largest taxi company and it has no vehicles. And similarly, there are other disruptive technologies that will influence the way we work. The last contextual factor or shift is around economic power distribution, which is based on shifting from the global north to the global south in terms of and particularly within the African context, shifting from we've spoken about Africa rising 2 decades ago, and as we think about the population growth of Africa. By 2015, it's predicted that the population will double in Africa, and it will be one of the youngest populations on the planet in terms of its average age. And so that really, in terms of economic power, means that there'll be a shift in terms of where workers may be coming from as we move into the future. Now, all of these contextual shifts has an impact in the way we organize our organizations, the way we work, and how we show up as workers, and also the leadership of the future. And this is what we intend to cover a little bit more in more detail later. But just very briefly, as we think about the organizations of the future, what we found in the literature and also in our interviews, focus groups, is that organizations of the future will need to be more purpose-driven. The way we think about work, we need to reconceptualize as we think about work and what meaningful work means. And later we'll also talk about hybrid work with Andrew and Rob Jardine, and thinking about the different locations from which people are executing their work from. But all of this will also impact the way we need to, will impact the psychological contracts in organizations as well. And as we think about the worker of the future, individuals will have to deal with higher levels of ambiguity and complexity as technology moves human endeavor up in the value chain. Employability will be based on not necessarily specialized, but versatile skills. The way we think about work, life philosophies will be challenged. And thinking about the way we think about our work will shift in terms of our multiple identities, where we may work for different organizations at the same time, and how that impacts then the way who we are and who we connect with in terms of organizations. And I think in the center of all of this is how leadership of the future will shift. So moving from, a very individualistic way of thinking about leadership to a more shared, distributed leadership to effectively deal with the more demanding, constant changing, and radical context in which we operate as we move into the future. Now, all of this, if we think about the implications of this in terms of IOP, so as IOP psychologists, we'll have to demonstrate visible and concrete proactive ability to constantly ask new questions and find new answers, to do so systematically, critically, and creatively in an agile, responsive, and flexible manner as the new world of work unfolds. And in each of our sessions, you'll see we will unpack the implications of the emerging world of work, not only on the people that we serve, but also on us as psychologists. And so with that, I will hand over to Sharon to talk about the moral and values ethics base and continue the conversations that she's had before the session. So Sharon, I'll hand over to you.
Thank you very much, Rowan. So if you were in the previous ethics session, you would have met Rav and Simona and I talking about this, future fit moral values ethics base for industrial and organizational psychologists. So we are saying the world is changing at lightning speed. And I often think of that quote that, fish is only as strong as the water that it swims in, right? So while it can, be applied to culture, I think it also applies to how we navigate this complexity that we find ourselves in within the world of work. As big data makes, a huge impact in terms of how we work, as we have to make decisions around automation, as we are using AI within the world of work, what is that internalized self-regulatory departure point? I think it's important for us to be very clear that we no longer have the luxury of just letting things happen on their own. We need to operate from a base that is uncompromising. We need to be intentional in terms of how we are ensuring that we create humane work. We need to make ethical decisions around technology because we're saying the world is about people. How do we bring humanity back to the fore? So yes, technology is amazing. Yes, technology is going to be here with us. And if I think about the work that we did in this chapter, lots has shifted from 2020. A lot of the stuff that we were predicting would be happening in the future are happening already. So we put forward a model, which you saw in our earlier conversation. And here we're saying Ubuntu underpins the work that we do. And Ubuntu, as we understand it, is I am because we are. So when I know that my existence is dependent on other people, how does that influence how I make decisions around what is fair? Right? How does that influence how we coexist within the organization? So as future guardians of the world of work, ethics is really the bedrock of how we are making those decisions. What are some of the things that we need to be thinking about? And we took you through that decision tree in our earlier session where we're interrogating, have we included everybody who needs to be part of the conversation? Are we ensuring that there's inclusion? Are we removing bias that could potentially impact the kind of decisions that we're making within the world of work? So this is an ongoing conversation. We can no longer wait for institutions to tell us that this is how I must behave ethically. I must build up that robust ethical framework within myself and get the support from these different institutions. So I think there really is a place for us as work psychologists to influence the trajectory around this moral values and ethics space. So how are we talking about work? How are we educating our future industrial psychologists? And in the next sessions that are going to be presented, you'll get to just tease a little bit more around our thinking in terms of the future world of work. So I hand back to you, Theo, to pass on to the next person.
Thanks, Theo. I'll take it from there. So thanks, Sharon, for that, setting that up. My partner in this is Kim Lee Wenzel Ricketts, and we contributed chapter 4 in the book. And just a short ad break, I'd like to encourage you to go and have a look at that video clip, which presents a very quick summary on our findings. You'll find that video clip or the link to that in the community board on WOVA. And then I encourage you to attend our session that we're going to be hosting later on in the conference, where we're going to go into a bit of action planning on the response of the IOP to this new world of work. Now, we know that behavior in the context of work explores the impact that individuals, groups, structures, and systems have on behavior within organizations. Various disciplines contribute to understanding of behavior in the world of work, such as psychology, sociology, industrial anthropology, and the more recent neuroscience of work. And then, of course, industrial psychology. Now, industrial organizational psychology can be defined as an applied division of psychology that is concerned with the study of human behavior as it relates to work, organizations' productivity. And it focuses on the scientific study of employees, workplaces, organizations. Now, this definition is important because it is shifting now to some extent, and we are experiencing it already. It calls for a greater focus on our purpose and why we are here. Some of the greatest work that is required is in self-mastery, understanding our core identity and agency to be a purpose-driven social citizen and activist for humanity. Marissa, can you mute yourself, please? Thank you. So to be a purpose-driven social citizen and activist for humanity in the context of work, and also emphasizing humane work and working conditions. Like Dr. Imta said, if you are clear on your purpose and your calling, you will always know what to do, irrespective of where you are or what title is bestowed on you. We need to look deeply at who we serve. Are you primarily focused on your client, those that can pay for your service, like the large corporates, the business executive? To what extent are you applying yourself to serve all workers, not only those in formal employment? Are you helping those small business owners who can't pay the high fees? Are you empowering the unemployed or those still figuring out their career paths? How are you making an impact in society? Are you influencing policy framework? Is your work, what we do, leveraged from multidisciplinary practice areas for multiple stakeholders with a different emerging mode, a different worldview, decision-making approach, and value orientation, as Sharon alluded to? And humane, fit-for-purpose engagement delivery, striving for excellence. And with all of this, meaningful work forms the departure point of IOP as a science practitioner. Thanks, Theo. Decent work helps all workers to attain a sense of self-respect and dignity, experience freedom and security in the workplace, and as far as possible, affords the opportunity to choose and execute productive, meaningful, and fulfilling work that will enable them to conduct themselves adequately and without restrictions, and to make a social contribution. So thanks, Theo. In conclusion, as science practitioners, IOPs have to become relentlessly purpose-driven in their passionate pursuit of reimagined, sustainable, humane work. I don't think there could have been a better push for this than the message that Dr. Imta has shared with us. And we are the custodians of this humane work and meaningful work that we can create. And we can create that through engaging collaboratively with all the wicked challenges that we are faced with, the issues, the problems of this changing world of work. And in this way, being visible, active, assertive social citizens, leaving a lasting and worthy legacy. ultimately, IOPs must contribute to unleashing the fifth industrial revolution, which is really a technology-enabled but humane society. And with that, I'll hand over to my colleague Shalene to tell us how we're going to build the skills and capacity to do this.
Thank you very much, Theo, for leading this great project, and to my fellow preceding authors for this great collaboration. I think, you know, it's on days like today when you realize how wonderful it has been, the journey has been, starting right when we had, when we were thrown out of the CSIR by the president, Cyril Ramaphosa, when he brought the Chinese president to South Africa. And, you know, with grace, we accepted some funding, which we were able to use as part of this project. So it brings back great memories to me. And, you know, I am very proud to be a past president, honorary member at IOPS, but also just, you know, to be able to engage in the way we have with Theo and this team. So our chapter looked at education, training and development for IOPs, what would make us future fit. We know that the world of work is changing, you know, drastically. So the disclaimer, I think, for me is to say, when we did this research, you know, there were certain, we looked at the World Economic Forum, we looked at what are the trending skills in IOP for IOPs. We encountered two noteworthy research associations. The one was the International Association for Applied Psychology, and the other one was the Union of Psychological Sciences. Recently, when I did some research for my leadership and development strategy at work, you know, I was curious to see what's the latest trends for HR professionals, what's the latest trends for industrial organizational psychologists who are also, you know, professionals in the human sciences and human capital space. So this, I would say, model is not then the end, but what we did discover from our research then was the contextual fit, four areas in which our profession would be anchored in: the contextual fit, our identity, our purpose and legacy that we want to leave behind, and then our moral values and ethics base, which is fundamental to how we show up as professionals. Within that, you know, it's specific capabilities that we look at to you know, in which we would want to grow. For example, our personal attributes. What are those? Who am I as a person? You know, my frame of reference as a person. What are my beliefs, core values that drives me every day? How much knowledge do I have? What do I know and don't know? And we also looked at, you know, our education, training and development. For example, you know, where will we learn? How would we shape the scientist practitioner development, for example, and you know, and then our professional maturity. For example, you know, what is it that I need to do to get to the next career stage? And we know that, you know, career navigation is an important thing. We've shifted from career management. And, you know, just contextually for me, if I look at, you know, the kind of questions that talent is asking, the kind of questions that, you know, that one wants to ask about, where am I going? You know, do I want to swim in the big ocean where there's so many other things I have to navigate? Or do I want to just be a small fish in a small pond? So we are asking ourselves critical questions as IOPs. However, I think, you know, in being of service to organizations as an IOP, you also have to think about what are your stakeholders asking? What questions are they asking? What questions are CEOs asking? What questions are chief learning officers asking in relation to the contextual fit? So we've taken an outside-in generated, integrated, holistic profile of a future fit IOP for mastery, translated into the capabilities framework, which you see, and a maturity curve, which we will talk about more in our session on Friday. ETD delivery of framework requires formulation of future-ready ETD philosophy, reconceptualizing of our education, training, and development types powered by DIVAs, which is automation, the 4IR technologies, and molding of responsible education, training, and development parties, such as IOPs, the HPCSA organization, and other associations, and really to nurture a tight community of practice, with clear roles. Overall growth and meta capability of thinking and acting as IOP psychologists in an excellent way. Those are some of the features. And in closing, I would just like to, ask Natasha and Lynette, if they don't have their cameras on, to put their cameras on. They are my partners in crime. They have helped me prepare for Friday's session, and I'm sure you're going to have a lot more engaging and excitement on Friday, where we can dig deeper into these capabilities and these frameworks, and where we can get your input into, what should we be looking at going forward and into the future. Thank you, Theo. From my side, I think that's the end.
Crystal and Beatrice, please.
Thanks, Theo. So as our colleagues have shared with you at this particular point in time, we've had different streams, and the research stream then was sort of like we had to take the lead to try and come up with a possible solution to how should we practice research in this new changing world of work. So our colleagues have already alluded to the fact that we've published all of this in our book. But in our response as scientists, practitioners, in terms of how do we then conduct research within this changing world of work, Crystal and myself were then informed by different frameworks. So we reconsidered our scope of practice as work psychologists. And as you've heard through the keynote this morning, but also in Sharon's session, the issue of stakeholder involvement or the expansion of stakeholders are crucial. And hence, you will see a little bit later what do we mean by that. So we've looked at our scope of practice and how that's likely going to change and how we need to then conduct our research accordingly. We were also informed by the United Nations development goals and how some of those goals can be associated with the different themes that emerged from this Future Fit project. And then finally, we also had a look at the different sort of like suggestions that came from the South African Presidential Commission on the Fourth Industrial Revolution. So all of those frameworks then informed Crystal and myself to try and figure out what kind of research approach or what kind of research will then be necessary for us to move into the future world of work. So Crystal, myself, and also with the help of Theo, we then realized that if we would like to sort of like revisit what we are doing and what we are researching, we are definitely smack bang in the middle of an inappropriate, dare I say it so boldly, maybe even irrelevant research paradigm. And in the book, and later this week, you will hear a little bit more about it, how we actually came about with our new aspirational research framework. So Theo, if you would be so kind as to move to the next one.
You wouldn't like to talk to this one very briefly, what I brought up?
So it's sort of like just quickly, well, I can quickly talk to it, but although it will be covered in the aspirational model as well. So the aspirational model then requires us as a future fit IO psychologists to then look at the merits of what must be done, what must we research to be meaningful, but also impactful in terms of the kinds of things that we are going to research and who will benefit from it. So the aspirational research model then takes into consideration our new context of the world of work. It takes into consideration the competing interests of the different stakeholders that have been identified through the Future Fit project, and then trying to sort of like better understand how can we sort of like redesign our whole research process, meaning knowing what, knowing why, but are we just doing research for the sake of doing research? Who will benefit from it? And as you will hear later during the conference, the whole issue of benefit and meaningfulness plays an important role in our new aspirational research model. And we would love to get your inputs there as well. So if we move away from the traditional research paradigm, then we need to find better ways of communicating and sharing our knowledge with the different stakeholders. So we are not saying that we should not publish journal articles, not at all, but we need to provide just-in-time information tailor-made to the needs of the different stakeholders that have been identified through this project. And hopefully, if we do our job well as researchers moving into the Future Fit project, then we will be able to conduct research that will leave a legacy, that will have a social impact, that can show that we are responsible researchers, not just to science, but to the well-being of different stakeholders, and then to create a lot more synergy amongst the needs and expectations of the different stakeholders and shareholders. Thanks, Theo. So yeah, so later in the conference, we will unpack this and see how we can come up with new ways of doing research, what we should be doing, how we should be communicating it, and, well, not to let the cat out of the bag too much, how we can get the different ecosystems involved in research to, and this includes IOPS, how we can look at those different ecosystems to start working together. Thanks, Theo.
Thank you, Petrus. So what we're facing is the following, represented in here in a word cloud. All of those that we try to, through the different 5 research streams, to make sense of and to organize. And that's the challenge we face, colleagues, is how we're going to get ourselves, with reference to everything there on screen, future fit and future ready. And hence the purpose then of the book, that we to act as this travel guide 5 to 10 years out in enabling and empowering IOPs to make the future present tense. And for that, we've set up the 5 Action Future Fit work sessions. The one we've had already, and I think it's because of a change in program, and that was the session 2, that we will look at the sessions listed there at the different times, at different days. Later today, we'll also have the one on the Future Fit world, the changing world of work. And the whole agenda for each of these sessions is to describe again, to pick up, but this session was about introducing the work streams and giving it a high level and overview of what was covered, but drill down more into that in the respective sessions, and then actioning recommendations in 2 places. The one for you as the attendee of the session, what are some of the individual takeaways for you to get yourself future ready and fit? I mean, Sharon in her session and Ravi, Ramona emphasized the whole essence of understand the moral values, ethics base, but have then available a decision tree that takes you through such that you can make appropriately morally value-based and ethical decisions. And at the same time in the session, talk about possible actions we as a profession with its stakeholders must consider: the what, the who, the by, when, the how. For example, let's take what Natasha's presented as. How do we actually build IOPs of the future with a strong, assertive, social conscious type of identity through the education, training, and development? In the case of Charlene, how do we actually give IOPs, and who should be giving the IOPs the capabilities, how they must actually engage and can engage in a future fit way with the future? And the last one that Beatrice presented is the whole issue of pacing the rate at which we do our research to the pace at which the world is changing out there. So having actioning those recommendations, having some group discussions, maybe talk about a road ahead in terms of future actions that we have to take in order to have, and from all of these sessions, have a high level future engagement and actioning report probably in about 8 weeks' time after the conference, once we've written up the output of each of the 5 sessions. So colleagues, thank you very much, Sharon. It's over. We've got, I think, 5 minutes for questions and answers. If there are any questions, and any of the team, please come in if you think it's appropriate.
Thank you, Theo. We have 5 minutes, colleagues. You're welcome to unmute and ask a question. Or you can comment in terms of applicability in your particular section. And other stream leads, you're welcome to also jump in and comment in the last 5 minutes that we have before lunch.
Thanks, Sharon. Maybe just me with my dark sense of humor. So I think the colleagues who will be attending Crystal and myself session later, please don't worry, we will not share with you too much sort of like surveys that you need to complete. Although Crystal and myself are both comfortable with quantitative research, we will resist the temptation to send you a link to a Google form with some ratings, so no worries.
So you will take a qualitative approach to your session, Beatrice, not quantitative? Or a blended approach?
I'll try my best.
Yeah, so some comments about how interesting the session was, especially the research part. Other comments before we get into the lunch break. So colleagues, we have lunch from 12:30 to 13:15, where we have our next keynote from Sazini Mojapelo. So you have a few more minutes before we say bye-bye.
Sharon, I think our session is very well placed, because I mean, if you're in a state of future shock, you need to eat. It helps you, you know, to engage energetically with the future. You know, to engage with the future on an empty stomach is high risk stuff, right?
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Sharon, I might just comment that I've put the YouTube link in the chat on WOVA and on the Zoom chat. For anyone wanting to attend Kim and my session a little bit later this week, please have a look at that just to set you up, because we're going to do a working session, so we're not going to go back to the findings again. So just remind yourself what the findings were so that you can come in and contribute to the action planning.
Yeah,
so you must look at the video as a prerequisite for being admitted to your session, Natasha.
And we'll also add a poll. We'll do the test that the academics don't want to do.
We must add a couple of polls to get some scientific quantitative data.
Yeah, seeing that the academics don't want to do any tests.
No, absolutely.
This is the craziness that you miss when we don't. I think we must think about another book now, Theo.
Yeah.
What's the next book?
Well,
I'm done.
We'll get you to project lead something in the private sector for
Yes.
another
okay.
profession.
Thank you.
So thank you very much, colleagues. This brings us to the end of our conversation today. A really big thanks to your leadership, Theo, for taking us through, and to the streams, the different work streams, the hard work that happened in the background, the multiple meetings amidst real life happening, because all this was done virtually. So it really was a big feat that we managed to achieve this in such a short space of time. And colleagues, use the insights, test it out in the different places that you find yourself, and give feedback. You know, all of us, feel free to pop us an email, ring us, and see how we can make this work a reality. It requires all of us. So active citizenry is the serious call for action for today. Thank you so much, and have a beautiful lunch, and we'll see you at 13:15 for our keynote.